Kia ora, good evening. Welcome to one more session of Coding Nights New Zealand. And tonight we have Bruno Lucas. Bruno, how are you?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Do well. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you again, like just to come and share with us your knowledge and experience. And what are you bringing to us tonight?
So we are having part two of comparing message brokers and event brokers, integrating them with software as a service. Received quite a few interesting comments from the last, and I decided to do a follow up to bring some new stuff, go deeper, and also to make some corrections from the last part.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely had like a really good like feedback. People like I think like they are doing like more and more integrations, right? As most of the platforms nowadays just software as a service. And yeah, what you're bringing like has really great value for the community. But before like Bruno, you start, just let me share, just talk a little bit of the user group. And so if you are coming here like for the first time, so like just to tell you, so we are Codinite user group. We are a community of developers that we love coding and to follow best practices on software development, languages and technologies. In general, we tend to focus more like on Microsoft technologies, but are open like to different stacks. Really, we like learning new languages, new tooling. And the intent of the user group is to enable like developers with practical knowledge to excel and launch their careers. So if you're a junior, if you are a lead dev, you're gonna make like good use of our sessions. You're definitely gonna learn something new every single time you come in here. That's for sure. We have like sessions that are aligned just to bring like some great content. Also, I'd like to say that we're parts of Azure Time, so we are a cloud native user group where we talk about the latest and greatest on the cloud native space. We're also sponsored by the .NET Foundation, which is a entity that looks after the different open source .NET projects. And with no further ado, Bruno, I'll just give you the floor. And let me just bring like your screen or your slides in here. Here we
Awesome.
go.
Just go back a little bit. See. So today we'll discuss deeper dive into Kafka. I don't think I spoke much about Kafka last time. Uh, Different options for a platform as a service, logic apps, Azure Function, um, adjusting cost to load size or load to cost less. So how to understand what you're going to do to see what technologies to combine for the best cost and still like the best performance. And I add that last minute Kubernetes and Kera. I had an awesome time playing with that. It's a new option, and I'll be talking about later
Very
on this
cool.
presentation. And that ingestion, because also like I've been speaking a lot about event-driven integration, but data ingestion is being added to some platforms like Dataverse and probably be the future. And conclusions. So it's a lot of stuff. I'll try to don't take too long because it's Monday night here in New Zealand. Probably like some of you are not in New Zealand. It's still Sunday. So I won't keep you too long. I'll try like to share as much good information as possible quickly so you can get back to our normal lives.
Nice.
So I'll just go quickly through Kafka because I use that. I still use that a lot, and it's pretty present on large corporates. If you're starting fresh, there's no need to go to Kafka, but like many of you probably will see that it has a long legacy and still the most high performance event broker. So if you're using Azure to do the integration, right now can only use Azure Functions. Logic app still not, might be able to do a custom connector, but there is no Kafka connector. So, and also there is no serverless, like you can spin your event hub or service bus as serverless very quickly. For Kafka, there's Confluent Cloud, and you can deploy that in a Confluent Azure subscription, but not on your subscription. Or if you know that very well, Kubernetes, you could deploy as an image or even a VM. So you still can use, it's just not as quick and easy to provision as Event Hub and Service Bus. It is an event-driven platform, but with an interesting feature similar to a message bus. You can do deliver only once and filtering, but you can, those features are not present in Event Hub. So another interesting feature is cluster link that's similar to a database link. Again, like it's just gonna matter if you, for example, have a partner, a company that is a partner, and you want to link your Kafka to their Kafka, and you have like a pretty much like the same topics, and kind of add like some shortcuts. But again, it's a pretty expensive feature for some situations. Yeah, as I said, it is definitely more expensive. So here, like the price, as you can see, is $1.50 per hour on standard, and there's like this other, but like in 3 days, that's gonna beat. Yeah, I wrote here in 3 days. You just need 3 days to catch up with a monthly cost of Event Hub. So it's not like for any project. It does deliver, and some people prefer, like a lot of companies still prefer Kafka, but yeah, it's gonna cost you. So the deliver only once is achieved through what they call in Kafka transaction. So it is, that feature is not available yet on Azure Function. I found the source code for the library, and I had a play and added myself. You can find here on this link. I'll post later. Actually, I may be able to share here on my screen.
Do you want to bring like your screen?
Yeah.
Okay, let me.
So that's something I committed this code to the worker library. I only found a worker, not isolated, but all that I've done is like adding a parameter
Can you please just zoom in a little bit more?
Is it possible? How do I zoom?
It's just the browser
Oh,
percentage. Yeah, on the dots in there. Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, it's better. Yeah, yeah, that's good.
So yeah, it all came down to this line here. So I add that to the trigger. The consumer is a little bit more complicated. So to do on the consumer, you're gonna have like to enable transaction in many places, like here in consume. Oh, wait a minute, just 1 second. That's actually not it. Here. So you got to add a transaction ID, initiate the transaction, then begin and commit here. And then there's another commit on the consumer. So it
You
was
also like just zoom in a little
maximize
bit
a little
more.
bit.
Yeah. Maybe like 110% of Visual Studio.
Where do I go? It's on the view.
At the bottom in there, like on the left
Yeah.
side, the other side. Yeah, that one. Okay, yeah,
So
that's
again,
fine.
you add it here and here, initiate the transaction, and begin commit. It was pretty fun to play, but one cost of using that to produce is pretty slow. The production is a lot slower. The consuming is fast enough, but producing will slow down. And here, yeah, you just use the Confluent Kafka C# libraries for that. So yeah, I now you can put it back on this slide.
Yeah, let me bring it back.
So yeah,
There you
I had
go.
a play with that and got some interesting numbers here. Um, so running, I started straight running that on a premium Azure function with the defaults. Then I enabled the transaction without any the duplication. So like open for duplicates. So there was no duplicates. It loaded 5,000 records at a speed of 161 records per minute. Not bad. Spoiler, it did better than Event Hub, but it's not like a drastic improvement. Then I used the scale out. If you know Azure Function Premium, you can really crank it up to a lot more than consumption. Still, if the transaction on didn't make much difference. And there was a missing record, what bring me like to that you're gonna read now and then the word guarantee to deliver. That guarantee is not really the best word for that. If more pressure you put, more complication, there is a tendency of something go off now and then. That's why it's important, like to do the logging, to track your IDs, to know where that record failed, and see if there's a necessity of replay, or if it is maybe like there's a retry, and that will be caught again. But yeah. Then
I got a question. So
yeah.
like, should we use like Kafka for, well, if you want like guarantee delivery of the message or the event, right? Should we be
Uh,
using that, or should we use a different technology?
none of them really guarantee what can happen. Let's say you have a very nice piece of code deployed with DevOps, nobody touch anything manually. It might run for a long time without any problem. Funny things that happened to me in the past is like somebody push a batch that's wrong, and somebody asked me like to delete. I tried to delete manually from the storage. Didn't know, it was early days. It created like havoc. So it all depends of the Azure function being running, the service, there is no interruption. Kafka is a little bit better than Hub because it doesn't use the storage for checkpoint. With Event Hub, you have the checkpoint. Anything goes wrong with the storage or the checkpoint, yeah, things will get uglier. Here, Kafka, I notice is slightly better because it doesn't use the storage for checkpoint. But it's still, I managed to get this missing record, and because I was just doing the load, I didn't go dig why it happened, but it happened.
Mhm.
And again, it's my code in process. It's an outdated library, so it might be that. Then to the next one was without still the what was it? I I don't remember what I did here that created several duplicates. The transaction was turned off. Yeah, with all that processing power, transaction off, I got like quite a few duplicates. Oops.
Let's come back like to the screen or to
Yeah, to
the
this
slide.
slide. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
And again, with the duplication on, I got 167 records per minute. So considering software as a service is many times shared with other people in different environments, we can tell this is more or less the same. So it was fun to play with that, but considering your application has built-in deduplication rules like Dataverse has or Salesforce, you don't need to use that. Just control the Azure function with the duplication rule on, and you'll be fine. So whenever you're going to start a project, and you got to understand the receiving end. On our case, is Dataverse, but this procedure applies to any software as a service. Go and find the documentation to understand limits. You cannot just like start pushing stuff and expect nothing is going to happen. You need to adjust your integration to meet these limits. And as it says here, the limits are subject to change and may vary between different environments. And if you've been working for Dataverse, you know that's true. On the 3-4 years ago, like these numbers were a lot more generous. Then they were cut down a little bit. And I think as Salesforce is from the beginning, they're figuring out the best thing to do is rather than go one record per connection, you do a bulk. So both Dataverse and Salesforce provide bulk inserts. And if you use the bulk insert, you consume less. So with one of my integrations, I busted the 6,000 in 5 minutes very quickly. So I start to add a little delay, 2 seconds delay between records to make the window last a little longer, and that improved quite a bit. Same thing here. So there's a difference between to be concurrent, they got to accumulate. To accumulate, for example, if you have if you put too much logic on your Azure function and we start like to update several entities, that's going to take a lot longer, and they're gonna like parallel doing things, and they're gonna hit that a lot faster. So things that you need to do is might put a little break, not into the Dataverse transaction, but right after, before the function finish, to escape this, especially if you don't have much happening. If you have like a very short record creation, what happens, it will free up, you do the work, free up space for more parallel instances, and then you're going to have like more connections in a shorter time. Things, yeah, and again, like back, if always like good to check if your application provide ingestion or bi-directional, or maybe sometimes you just need to push somewhere else, because it's a lot simpler. Salesforce is not bad, but it's a little bit less than Dataverse. But like I just put that there to show you, documentation is out there. Most modern software as a service will have that. If you don't have that, you might get in touch with the manufacturer to see if they can help you out. But yeah, similar, less the limits are shorter, and I had, because I have a developer, I had to stick with that. So I got connection errors all the time during my load testing. But again, it is not the end of the world. It just means if you have lots of data, use bulk operations. So yeah, like going back to that, like most SaaS will offer bulk. The bulk operation is like a class in Dynamics. For example, you can create like an array of accounts if you are creating accounts. Same thing, Salesforce. If you want to create like 10 accounts in one go, you just create an array, and there is support for that. You just need to get classes like this one is going to check which the documentation for Dynamics. And if you read here, each create multiple and update multiple requests counts as a single request. So that means if you have like a 1,000 requests, you push 100 per request, you're gonna get a lot more and avoid falling off into the error. And planning the design of your integration. This is always clever to try to do the heavy work on the extremes, most like on the source. So if you can prepare your data here as good as you can, you avoid putting here. If you put in here, you start to fall into time limits, timeouts. So Azure Functions have timeouts, Dynamics have timeouts. You don't want to, like, if you have a 20 to do one record creation, you got to go through 20 entities. That's going to take a long time. Both Dynamics and Salesforce give you the option of creating a custom API where you can encapsulate all that long logic, provide one API. So you just put like a one payload over there rather than like doing a 10 to 20 payload calls create. Yeah, I've tried to do that in the past. Didn't work very well. So I suggest to make your payload lean, avoid business logic, heavy business logic on the Azure function. Oh, this got a little squeezed here. So one of the challenges to control your integration with against those limits is avoid parallelism to spin way too many and create too many concurrent connections. Yeah, that definitely is not going to help. But for Azure Functions, it gets a little trickier. For Service Bus is a little bit better. Like you can see here, you still can do something. For Event Hub, you don't have control of the concurrence. Still, the way that the Azure function cause the parallel instances to pop is as the work starts to get too heavy, the telemetry of the function tell the scale out to bump up. And if you have a lot of work dumped into the hub or into the bus, that scale out is going to crank it up. If the bus, you can have some control here. But again, on my experience, from time to time, they change these. And if you dig into the forums, you're going to see like, oh, I set that up, but it's not working. So I wouldn't put much money. That's going to be always working. It changed from time to time. The Kubernetes, in the other hand, has the Kata, and you can limit the amount of parallel. Well, there's no, it creates another pod. That's what I understand. The telemetry will tell Kata to go to Kubernetes and create another pod, and that give you like more parallel instances. But somewhere on Kata, you can go and limit that. it's just like it's a lot more complicated than that. You're gonna have to be, if you're not familiar with Kubernetes, you're gonna have like to get your head around it. There is a few advanced settings that I tried. They worked to a point, but they didn't make that much difference. And this one is on trial. So we will see. Like I'm gonna share some results.
Are they applicable like to Windows and Linux instances, or?
I think I didn't try Linux. I try on Windows.
Yeah.
But again, like one of them is kind of a trial. Is still not like a final. And I
It's,
did
it's still
notice like
the public preview.
public preview. Yeah, that's the word.
Public preview. Yeah.
So yeah, like as you see with Azure Functions, you got to put a lot of work. You got to be a developer, and
Yeah.
reading documentation is really good. While like Logic apps have all of that in the through a dial, so you can just limit here. I used that before with Service Bus, and Logic apps will be more expensive than both Hub and Bus, but if you're adding a lot of flows, changing all the time, that is a drastic time saver. And if you're also like what I suggest, if you don't have, if you want to play and find a breakpoint, start with a Logic app and point to your software as a service and tune it up. Start with as low as 10, then go to like 12, 16. I think Dataverse breakpoints around 16. If you don't set this up, the default is to use as many parallel instances as processing power of your Logic app can provision. That will definitely break.
Yeah. Oh, you're gonna pay more and not
Yeah,
get like great
but again,
results.
you don't need to use that, but you can. You don't need to deploy that Logic app, but you can use that during dev time, just to quickly find your ideal
Yeah.
parallelization.
Yeah.
Then I did some load tests. Started with the service bus and with Azure Function Standard. And last time somebody asked me about price. That's the best deal you're gonna get. So if you are around like tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands or millions per day, that's a deal. I suggest you go with Service Bus and Azure Function Standard. Interesting thing with a Service Bus, without any restrictions, it went to this ridiculous number here, like the Azure function for Dataverse. I put a delay of 2 seconds. By delay of 2 seconds, I mean do the work, insert the data into Dataverse, and wait 2 seconds. I try to limit it to 10. In scaling, I put on the maximum. Duplication is always on, the duplication detection. So I'm not using anything fancy, not expecting the Service Bus pick lock to take care. I just enable that on the software as a service end. So if a load of 500, it did a little bit above of 500 records per minute. Same thing with the Salesforce. Then if a load of 1,000, Azure Function in Dataverse delivered 1,000 in 1 minute. In Salesforce, then like start to slow down. So I was quite surprised. You can see here on this side, the function execution count, it went berserk. So these parallel instances didn't work. It just like decide it told there's a lot of work. The telemetry of the Azure function for service bus is pretty intense. It just told like the Azure function to go and spend more and delivered. Then if you see the cost of the bus is, what's that, a penny or is a fraction. It's very cheap per hour on the standard. There is no fixed, there's a, this one is fixed, but it's really, really cheap per hour. Unlike the hub that we're going to see later, there's the processing units. Then the load testing with the event hub. So starting with an Azure Premium. I used Premium here because I was not very pleased with the results, and I was expecting like maybe using a Premium is going to help out. But again, I suspect what's happening here is the telemetry is not telling the function app to scale out as expected. So if it's always, this one had a delay. I didn't do the, sorry, I forgot to update here. I didn't do the Salesforce, but like on a Premium, Dataverse 2-second delay, duplication on, a load of 500, completed with a rate of 28 records per minute. That was the best result I could get with Event Hub and Azure Functions. So Salesforce with a load of 518 records per minute against 25. So if you see, Dataverse can take more than Salesforce. Not a drastic, much more, but if you go like connection per connection, Dataverse is doing better. And what's the difference here? I started like to play with trying to control using those advanced settings, but it didn't do much difference. And as you can see here, the execution count was a lot shorter than the service bus. So there's not much more. Then I tried like again on a Premium. That's still like the same. And try to play with the batch size to see if pulling more would make a difference. Maybe 1 record per minute, but yeah, there was. I tried a lot of. I also increased the partitions and processing units, and try both isolated and in process. Yeah, it didn't do much difference either way. I might need to revisit this to see if it is what it is. But if you look into Kafka is around 150, is a lot more than that. But both event hubs fell off a bit shorter to the service bus. And that's the cost of Event Hub. If you see, there is the basic, that's still more expensive than the service bus. But there's some catches with, I had to use a standard for my case because of the private link. If you're pulling data, if your producer is on-prem, you need a VNet. You're going to need a private link, so you're going to end up using standard. And if you add more processing units, it's going to add cost, but it's slight more expensive. Later on, I have like a breakdown from my Azure subscription to show the costs. So Event Hub is more expensive,
Yeah.
and deliver less. I mentioned on the last presentation, I would recommend Service Bus over event brokers for software as a service, not only for that, mostly because of the ability of control certain features a little bit better. You can also plunge messages in Service Bus. If Event Hub, if you have a big drop of wrong data, that's a problem. You cannot delete. You got to drop the whole hub. What's not a very nice thing to do. One thing that I had in mind is to create, if you're going to go with Event Hub, create a plunge function, a function we can use just like to filter a bad batch, so that you just like quickly drop all the unwanted record into the oblivion and do the checkpoint. And it will be a pretty clean way to get rid of that. When you try to drop, if you need to drop the hub, there's no other way. If you use something like Terraform or Biceps, use that to delete and reconstruct. Do not try to do manual deletion of things, because that will go ugly. So here's like a report that I get from my subscription. As you see, premium Azure Functions are really expensive. So be careful. I don't think that one case to use that if you have like lots of functions and you want to put into one function app, lots of flows. If you have like one or two, it's better put in a nice standard to do just as a good job.
Yeah, like for premium in general, like when we have, I use that for long running processes, because like the consumption is only by 10 minutes. If you like the premium, you can get up to 30 minutes on
Yeah.
that. Yeah, but it's expensive. Yeah.
Or if you didn't escape from adding long implementations inside of your function. Back to my other slides, I say like one way to execute a function quickly. Don't put too much code in that if you don't need. If you can move to the other sides, better to put there. If you can use that just like to pass data. But if there is no other way, you need to do crunching into the function. Then again, like you might want to consider premium with more power. Logic apps, it is not the cheapest, but again, you got to balance that with development time. To develop Azure Functions is going to take much longer, guarantee. I tried that comparing with different people, me, myself, in top-notch developers, bad developers. Logic apps always wins, deliver faster. So if you have a lot of work to do, it's better go with Logic apps. It might compensate, but if you're comfortable with Azure Functions, you know the cost. So Event Hubs, as you see, is a bit more expensive than the Service Bus. Again, both are like on the basic or standard. It's not very expensive. The Azure function is going to cost more. And there is this and the storage that comes along. Integration is all a combination of features. But as I said, Service Bus with standard Azure consumption, Azure function, is an awesome deal if you can fit into that.
Especially like for making use of those standard connectors.
Yeah.
So it's just there, it just
Yeah.
works. You don't need to code and create anything for that.
Yep. So Logic apps, now back to Service Bus. Since I've done like that load test with the Event Hub, I did this test, the same similar test as the Azure function, and I started with putting down to 10 parallel, and then all the way to 100. So the first batch pull 1,000 records in 5 minutes, so a rate of 200 records per minute. And here's the setup. Here's like 10 pulls every 1 second. And then the 100 parallel instances did 1,000 records per minute. So you can see here, it's very like whatever you do on your logic apps, you're gonna see reflecting very easily, like to measure. While if you do the Azure function, you're gonna have to code, see what's there that you can use to control, and sometimes like things don't reflect quite well. You gotta have some experience to get the same result with Azure functions.
Yeah, from my experience, like with working with flows and connectors, in general, like for flows, I tend to use logic apps
Mm-hmm.
because of the connectors that are available.
Mm-hmm.
In case like connectors that is, is not there, then I use functions
Mm-hmm.
to create, all right, custom. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but what I'm saying is that it like for integration, logic apps make sense really. You just have everything that you need in there. You don't need to think about like the underlying implementation.
Mm-hmm.
Others have thought for you on your behalf. Yeah.
Yeah. One catch last time, yeah, one of on the last presentation, one of our participants, Reza, reached out and told me about coming back and explain the guarantee in about the pick lock. So yeah, pick lock. If you read, if you go and search guarantee to deliver only once, they're gonna point to the pick lock and work most of the time if it is well adjusted, but it can break if you have too much and the lock expire. So the lock will stop other instances from picking records from the queue. But if that expire, yeah, you can see a lot of failures. So the guarantees of deliver only once or the pick lock will work most of the time as long as like this is well tuned and not funny happen on the bus side or yeah on the host. And logic apps with event hubs kind of it got a little better than service bus. Again, the way that all this work under the hood is different than by different teams. In logic apps, you have the ability to put a longer interval between batches. If you don't have that in Azure functions. Why is that? I'm not sure, but it comes down like to the way that the logic app team set it up, or if it's the Azure function team do their work. But things get different. So doing a logic apps in event hub with max concurrency, that's like I didn't change anything. That's how it comes. If you don't do anything, you'll go max. A batch of 1,000 records in 2 minutes, so 500 was a lot better, and no errors. So, again, with the duplication rules on, and here I reduced to 10 parallel instances, and it's slow. It went a lot slower. It didn't somehow like trying to control reducing the parallels didn't work as elegant. Like the breaks were taking longer. I don't know what happened there. With this worked fine. So I need to revisit this. I was doing that as the last this afternoon. Maybe I missed something, but again, Event Hub with Logic Apps came second to Service Bus, just like Azure Function. Yeah, so ranking, service bus. At some points, I managed to get 1,000 records per minute. Kafka got second with a pretty decent rate of 150 to 160. Event Hub behind with 26 to 28, and that match with what I use in production. I think we had a load one time of 40,000 that took 3 days. Yeah, so it's more or less that. So yeah, again, the code that I used to that I put on GitHub, and I'll try to revisit again with more time to confirm these numbers. And I plan to get in touch with Microsoft to confirm my theory of the telemetry. But yeah, at least with Event Hub, I can guarantee it's not going to get much better than that unless you use bulk updates. Again, all those numbers were individuals, like one record, one transaction. So you can improve these numbers a lot better, push a lot more records using the bulk libraries. This one I was. So then comes Kubernetes. That's pretty popular out there. And one cool thing about thinking Kubernetes while you're in Azure Function, both hosts will support a container. You can develop your function to a container, and then you can push your container to either. So if you're get interested after this to take a look into Kubernetes, or if you're already planning, you might want to already start like to get used to do your Azure Functions with a container rather than pushing the code in a zip. So the Azure Function Service is made of 2 key components that are runtime in the scale controller. And that's how you host that in Kubernetes. You push the runtime, but the scale controller, it will be managed by Kata. Kata is an open source library, I think, and that will look into the controller, and if needs more power, it will spin up. It can go from 0 to n instances depending on how much power you allocate to your cluster. It can also be used with container apps. That's a Microsoft version of a Kubernetes in serverless. The traditional AKS is good, like where I work, like people have been using Kafka in Kubernetes for a long time. So when I say, what about to use Kubernetes and Kafka, the discussion finish a lot shorter. If I say something like container apps, I got to explain non-Microsoft developers what it is, and I tend to get people rolling their eyes. So, but just to share here with you guys that that's cheaper, because AKS will require a VM, and these won't. Of course, you have more control here, but for simpler things, it might be cheaper than several function apps. But again, don't jump right straight into that without getting familiar with Kubernetes, unless you have a Kubernetes guru. The deployment's a bit different. You're gonna have like to be familiar with Docker and use Helm to push control things. It's simpler than people talk. I think people get afraid and build up a fear of Kubernetes when they see these funny names. I understand a lot better because I listen to people talking about them all the time, so I learned slow. But if you try to learn overnight, it's difficult. So I did a load test. I just tested service bus, a load of 3,000 messages, and I didn't put I forgot to put that 2-second delay. So it finished in 3 minutes, but only push 2077. Lots of errors because like if you forget to, if you return the connections too fast at this pace, you bump into that 6,000 connections per 5 minutes. And that's what happened here. It just, if you can see here, it scaled up to 16 pods. I think that's a pod. So yeah, it went berserker on the Dataverse and fell off. But yeah, it is awesome. It's if you wanna try yourself, you don't need to be a Kubernetes expert. I'll share later this URL, but it comes down to simple steps like you create a Docker image for your Azure function. Then you install Kata with kubectl. kubectl is the command line of Kubernetes. So you just, there will be instructions here. It's just like 4 command lines, very straightforward. They'll create the Kata service on your cluster. And then just a single command line to push the image into the Kubernetes. And that's it. Very straightforward. Now, of course, if you're planning to use that in production, you're going to have to get more familiar. The monitoring changes, and you're not going to have the Azure the function app nice UI to guide you through to spot things quickly. It's more command line. You're going to have like to get familiar with kubectl in Kubernetes monitoring. So, but I think that's the future, because a lot of people is already on Kubernetes, and sounds like, I cannot prove it right now. I heard a lot of people saying if you have lots of Azure function in a very big company, it'll be cheaper than spinning a lot of function apps.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
I agree.
And then, yeah, all of that might not be necessary if your software as a service has a data ingestion. It is kind of newish. Dataverse came with Synapse, and if you have FO or some higher subscriptions, you can get the integration module in and out. That's not exactly, doesn't work exactly like the Synapse. It still works through the OAuth API, but sounds like a lot less coding. And yeah, you don't need to spin up all that Azure infrastructure to do integration. It is also limited for now. You can do things like SQL Server, but it's not going to plug. It's still not plugging into any source just as yet. The Synapse is probably what I see the future. But again, the problem with software as a service, once the data is inside of the application, to get out is easy because it passes through all the business logic from the top. If you're familiar with Dataverse or Salesforce or most of those applications, there is out-of-the-box logic, and then you can customize more logic into the input of the record all the way to the database. So I guess that's why there's still no Synapse in, only Synapse out. How do you do that with from a source, any source, without passing through the business logic? So the Synapse is pretty fast, and it's more like to fit into the real time or near real time. This one looks promising too. I didn't have much time. Probably like the next is to have a play with this. But again, it always starts by understand the destination, your software as a service, all the features, all the limits. First, check to see if there is a reasonable data ingestion. If not, then check the limits. And back to that concept of real time or near real time, you got if you do individuals through a long load, it might not you might not meet the requirements because it is going to start to pile up. And if you check like the Event Hub, for example, 28 records per minute in a bulk of 10,000, that's not going to push everything real time. Like whoever is lucky to get first, maybe, but the last records are going to come later. Again, another thing that I didn't have time like to prepare for this presentation is the bulk. Look into the bulk, because then you can push like a much bigger amount of records. And one thing that I forgot to mention about the bulk, you also got to plan your monitoring, because when it is individual, if it fails into the Azure function, you track on the Azure function, say like the error was there. Once you push into the software as a service, a bulk, and there's like, let's say 100, one fail, you're gonna have like to figure out over there why it failed, and then like do the maths to see if it is recoverable, replay. Yeah, that's the Dataverse Synapse. And the Synapse is not going to be very cheap, because you're going to have like to get lake storage. You're going to have to be familiar with the data side of Azure. But again, that only provide data out. In the conclusions, yeah, as I said before, Service Bus is not bad. With it sounds like the best option for software as a service, especially if it is not going to be a tremendous amount of record. But still, even though if you put a lot, I've seen like a massive loads to go through without any problem. And both Azure Function and Logic Apps perform quite well. The consumption can scale quite well. If you don't tune it up yet, it is going to break the limits. The hub turned to be slower and more expensive. Yeah, so pretty much in Salesforce, it was a slight slower than Dataverse, but not much. It does have like shorter limits, and I think Salesforce's integrators have been going for bulk, while Dataverse tend to slack a little bit on that space, because Dataverse can take a lot of load. Again, those results that I got might differ. I did that in a trial Dataverse, but trial or sandbox, it depends where you are. The region of the world will be a different data center. It can be more or less. Yeah, and as I said, the guarantee is not really a guarantee. It if you tune it up really well, you might get like a one or two problems for a long period of time. You might be lucky to don't have none. But if you, as the load gets larger, you have a bigger chance to see problems. And if you poke around the infrastructure without good knowledge, then you're going to see a lot of problems. Yeah, make sure like you adjust parallelism in. The guaranteed delivery only once did not seem to drastically perform better. So if you don't want to waste time, understand that you might want to go for use your software as a service deduplication rule or idempotency resource, and that would be just fine. And I think that's all.
Yeah, that's really good like insights. Well, you basically just like bring loads and loads of information like onto a big bottleneck, right? The SaaS platform. But it's interesting to see how different services would behave in the level of configuration or the oh, how they some services alleviate the pain,
Yeah.
right? When you have like those challenges, yeah.
Hmm.
Because like for going to figure out how to code things to adapt for parallelism and yeah, that would be like a lot of work, yeah,
Yeah.
coming up from scratch.
I wish I could have like more answers about the ability to control parallel instances in Azure Function, but it didn't surprise me. Like since I start to work with, sometimes there's some settings there that help, then they disappear, then they come back, and sometimes with the version changing of the function, if you look around, you see people posting like, I did set it up, but it didn't work. So I'll see if I can get more answers about that. But overall, like Event Hub, I don't think that's the intent of that is you can. I do use Event Hubs for integration. They do deliver, but yeah, the reason why I use is because at work people use Kafka, and
Mhm.
Confluence had an adapter Kafka to Event Hub. They didn't have one for Service Bus, or at least like the people there didn't know. So I ended up with that. And if you get somebody force you to use the hub because of a business requirement, it's not the end of the world. But bear in mind, from all the testing that I've done, the speed is not optimal for this type of integration. If you
Yeah.
go see around, you can use, for example, your Event Hub to push your Azure Insights to on-prem or another online Insights application like Splunk.
Hmm.
I think whatever happens there is different, because if you do that, is a wizard. There's no coding. You can find. I can add later. That works really well. Works well for IoT
Yeah.
with databases like Cosmo.
Hmm.
But uh, I didn't
Yeah.
have like a very impressive results when integrating with Dataverse.
It's the design for scale. I think like
Yeah,
Dataverse wasn't created for it was good like for consumers, but not like for scaling or message scaling or mass right load. But yeah, I think like because of these different tenants, different
mhm.
consumers. But it's interesting. While like for example, Cosmos DB just was designed for that, so
Yeah.
it
I
just
need
like
to test.
absorbs like
Yeah,
the loads, right?
probably like when you're trying to insert into that, the telemetry is different. I don't know.
Hmm.
I'll need to see. Maybe I did something wrong, but I have like a similar approaches for
Yeah,
years, and I haven't seen much difference. But
yeah,
again, if anyone out there got better results, please share.
yeah. If you could please, Bruno, just share like the link of the GitHub repository
Ah, yeah.
for the code that you have showed, so people like could just try and perhaps provide some feedback as well.
I still need to check more. And the next step now, I'm gonna be how do I where do I add the comments?
Or just put like on the private chats, and
Ah,
then I
there.
can just
Okay,
bring in here.
there.
All right, let me copy here and put it, and I'm gonna bring to the screen.
Most of the code is there. I'm gonna be adding more on the next days, and probably like rerun a few things, dig deeper into the Event Hub side to see if I get any updates, so I'll add to the meetup or to the LinkedIn, or you can follow my blog. I'll type.
Hmm. Yeah, those are great findings, like to raise like to the product team,
Yeah,
uh, get like some sort of input and feedback from them.
yep. As a like the Kafka transaction was not there, I managed to find was very interesting to find the source for a Microsoft library, see how they structure things.
Hmm.
So it's pretty much like the functions are structured to listen to the events, but inside what they use is the same library that you use for if you had to do a console application running with a task manager.
Yeah. No, yeah, not sure like for getting like questions, but things were well, you have like really explained like this thoroughly and with those stats. So the link is here. I think like if we are going to get like some feedback, so feel free to jump to send like a message directly to Bruno or to the user group, and then we'll get back to you. Just like just to chat, and perhaps if you have any other findings, just also let us know, and then
Uh,
perhaps if it's of interest, we can have like other sessions with other examples. Yeah.
Let me just share one more here that for whoever got interested in playing with uh, Kubernetes. That's part two, and the part one is a 277. So very straightforward. I would suggest to follow by the book if you are not familiar. Don't try
So
to use Visual Studio 2022 to generate the Docker file. Use the command line and you'll be fine.
yeah, the Azure function core tools, right? So just
Yeah.
to initialize and create like those Docker files. Yeah, that's pretty
Yep.
good. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Bruno. Yeah, you're always welcome. And thanks for coming, sharing with us. If you have like any other good findings, if you'd like to share, just feel free just to ping me, and then we can have like a future sessions as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Marcel.
See you next time. Cheers.
Bye.